I'm very puzzled about why Fawlty Towers has had such an impact, because it just goes to show you really don't know anything. Even someone like myself, who at the time I did Fawlty Towers, had been doing television for quite a long time. I assumed it would be less popular than Python. And of course, it's much better known than Python now, especially in England. In America, everyone knows about Python, and a lot of them don't know about Fawlty Towers because that goes out on the public broadcasting service, which is only watched by the sort of better educated 2%. But in the rest of the world, wherever I go, everyone knows this program. And when Connie and I sat down to write it, we had absolutely no idea. But I suppose why it's worked so well is that very simply we worked so hard on it. You see, John Howard Davies, who did the first 6 shows, a marvellous fellow. He did the first 6 Pythons too. No, the first 4 Pythons. He said to me, do you realize that this script is 135 pages? And I said, well, you know, what's the average script? He said, 65. I said, what? He said, you're doing twice as many pages in the half hour. And he said, and I've looked at the camera cuts. There's 400 in a Fawlty Towers, there's 200 in an ordinary show. So there's so much packed in there that people can watch the shows again and again and still either see things that they never see before, or sometimes see things which they'd forgotten because there was so much to remember. If you watch a lot of shows, there's about 4 funny moments and you kind of remember what they were. So I think that that's really why it works. And the second thing is, I believe that everyone likes farce. And the great advantage of television, it is only 30 minutes. You see, if you tried to write Basil as a feature film, the degree of mania that you'd have to sustain over 90 minutes, I think wouldn't work, because I think the audience would become exhausted. You know, it's almost tiring watching Basil getting those friends. And there's the famous story, absolutely true, about the guy who wrote reports on scripts, who said in his report on Fawlty Towers, he said, this weak script is full of stereotypical characters and conventional situations, and I cannot see it being anything other than a complete disaster. And I have that framed on the wall of my office. I don't think when we started, Connie and I had a particular plan. I mean, what happened was that I went out to a restaurant in sort of Holland Park with dear Jimmy Gilbert, who I'd worked with when he was producer and director of the Frost Report. So I'd done 27 shows with Jimmy. I knew him pretty well. Very lovely, lovely, smart, kind, highly competent, very sort of observant man. And he said, would you like to do a series? And I said, well, you know what I'd really like to do is I'd like to do something with Connie. I'd like to write and perform something with Connie. And he said, well, why don't you go off and talk to her and give me a call when you've come up with something? And I said, after time, I said, we want to do it based in a hotel. It's very conventional, but everyone knows hotels, so you don't have to explain anything to the audience. But, you know, in an Undertaker series, you have to explain to the audience how an Undertaker runs, because most people don't know. Everyone knows how hotels run, because we've always been to hotels. We know what goes on, we know what's good service, what's bad service. And he said, fine, write me. There's no ad-libbing, because there wasn't time to rewrite the script. There was so much to learn in those 5 days. Somebody once said to me, did you enjoy making them? I said, there wasn't time to enjoy them, because I knew exactly that by Tuesday, 4 o'clock, we needed to be at a particular point. We needed to have blocked the thing and have rehearsed the first half of it thoroughly. I knew exactly the schedule, I should say, that we were on in order to get the thing into the studio in time. And it was still a mad improvised rush, because even in the studio, we never, all 12 programs had a full dress rehearsal because there wasn't time. You see, in those days, and I don't know how it is now, the BBC spent the money on the drama, because that was the prestigious stuff, you know. And the comedy, well, you were down there in the blood and the sand. You know, we had a day in the studio beginning at 10, rehearsed through 1 to 2 or 2:30 was a break, finish rehearsing at 6, have a little bit of food, relax, makeup, costume, and then the audience would be there at 8, and we had 2 hours from 8 to 10 to record the show. It's always been very simple, which is that I try to make people laugh as much as possible. And not everyone takes that attitude at all, particularly I would have said in the 70s and maybe the late 60s, when there were several comedy shows on television done by very smart, very educated people, but it was a very gentle comedy. I often felt they were more concerned to be clever than they were to be funny. And I always just wanted to make people laugh as much as possible. It really was just as simple as that. Therefore, I'm drawn towards farce because it produces extremes of behavior, and it's when there's tremendous energy going that the audience laughs the most. I mean, you can write the driest, wittiest thing in the world and people will laugh and enjoy it, but there'll never be the level of sort of laughing abandon that you get when you have a good farcical element, not least because in farce you can build lots and lots of visual gags. And if you want to make an audience really laugh, you want to get them on a roll, not just give them one laugh, break, next laugh, break. If you can go bang, 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 then you can sometimes get them hysterical. In fact, it's quite interesting because when we were doing Fawlty Towers, I used to say to the new actors who came in for rehearsal, I say, do not bother to wait for the audience to stop laughing before you do the next line. And they would always say, what? And I said, you've got a microphone here, you know, just literally up there. And the tape will record what you're saying because you're so close to the mic, regardless of how much noise the audience is making. And I want the people at home who are watching this program in ones and twos and who will not be affected by the infectious nature of laughter. They will be laughing much less than the people in the audience. So for the people at home, we have to play it faster than we will play it for the people in the audience. Well, the people in the audience are 200. The people at home are several million. So we have to concentrate on them. So I said, don't wait for the laugh. Just cut into it. Just keep the pace up. And that, I think, worked very well. It was also why we were able to do 135 pages when most people do 65, because they wait for every last laugh before they go on. Oh, no. I think there's 2 things that always attracted Connie and me to farce. One is that it's trying to make people laugh as much as possible, which means that people have got to get frenetic because that lifts the energy, and when the energy is highest, that's when the biggest laughs come. The other thing is about sort of an intellectual pleasure, which is that great farce runs like a piece of clockwork. You may not see what's coming, but when you think about it afterwards, it was inevitable logically that that is what would happen next. And I love that aspect of farce. And if you go and see Fader, you realize that it's a wonderful bit of intellectual clockwork. And one of the devices in farce is to have a situation and then to reverse the situation and then to reverse it back again. And it happens with the hotel inspectors because Basil doesn't know which person is the hotel inspector. And of course, the humor is the speed with which his attitude towards people changes depending on whether they're important or not. And it was also very evident in the episode about Basil the rat when they're trying to figure out which bit of veal was poisoned with the rat poison, on the grounds that if they know that that's the piece that was poisoned, then they can give the hygiene inspector another piece. But the moment that the cat starts reacting, they think, oh, wait a moment, he will have to get that piece back. And so that constant twisting and turning is very, very satisfactory as a farcical device. But you see, because we worked so hard on them, writing those scripts, if you can believe it, took 6 weeks per script. Now, no one has ever spent 6 weeks on a 30-minute script. Nobody. The writers who give quite a lot of time to a 30-minute script write it in 10 days. A lot of them write it in 4 days, which is why it's not very good and there's not much in it. So Connie and I, never started to write the dialogue until we got the plot right. And that usually took us 2.5 to 3 weeks. Then once we got the plot, we would start writing. Rehearsals was to buy the time to write these things with great care. And if I hadn't been doing commercials for Schweppes and what was the other one? General Accident, and these kind of people. If I hadn't been, I would have had to write the episodes much faster and they wouldn't have been as good. A television series. At the very beginning, of course, you don't know the characters anything like as well as you do by the time you get to the end, because you're developing them, and then if you're playing them too, then you're learning about them all the time, and your understanding of them gets deeper. In fact, when I write movies, I like to involve the actors in the later stages of the script, because if you involve them, after a time they begin to understand the character they're playing better than you do, so they can feed stuff back to you. But as a writer, you have to be very careful about what they feed back, because they might feed back something that's right for their character that isn't right for the whole overall piece. So the writer sort of maintains the overall control, but I like the idea of inviting the actors in. For example, I'm writing a movie at the moment that will probably make at the end of next year with Lisa Hogan, who's an old friend of mine, and we had dinner the other night with Kevin Spacey and said we'd like him to be in it. And we said we want you to write it with us. And to some extent, as Sybil and Andrew started to discover their characters, and also Ballard Berkeley and the old ladies, and later on Terry the chef, as they began to discover them, it was easier for us to write them better, because we started to incorporate stuff. We knew what they could do, little bits of business. I sometimes say, if I'm making speeches, that the motto of the British hotel industry is, we could run this place properly if it wasn't for the kind of attitude which you get a lot in business. You remember I did these video arts management and sales training films for years, which is that people actually forget what the purpose of their existence is. And it's absolutely true in the hotel business, because it's all got to be service-oriented, and people are always forgetting it, because people are fundamentally selfish. Unless they're very, very professional, they start thinking about their needs before the needs of the customers, and it can't run that way. And I sometimes come into a hotel, and within 5 minutes I know this hotel is run for the convenience of the staff. And that's like, you know, when the Americans arrive and want dinner, he says, you know, well, the chef stops at 9. The American says, well, why does he stop at 9? He says, well, he stops at 9. You know, that's convenient for us if he stops at 9. If it inconveniences the guests, well, that's... After I'd done this series, and also after I'd spent 19 years writing and performing in these training films that were about management and sales and service industries, I'm very, very acutely aware immediately whether the person I'm dealing with is any good or not. And if they're good, I think I appreciate it more than the average customer. But if they're bad, I think it irritates me more, because I really want to say to them, you're getting paid for this job, why don't you do it properly? You know, you're taking money. Now available for download at the iTunes Store.